She was standing on my lawn when I pulled into the driveway, heels planted like boundary stakes, clipboard tucked against her chest. Late afternoon sun, sprinklers ticking 2 houses down, the kind of suburban quiet people pay for. "Your trim color isn't approved," she said before I'd closed the truck door. "And the mailbox flag is non-compliant." I looked at the house. The trim was the same shade it had been since we bought it. The mailbox came with the property. "I'll review the guidelines," I told her evenly. Her smile tightened. "We have standards here." 2 neighbors had paused their walk. I noticed them without staring. I also noticed my phone was still in my hand. I tapped record and lowered it to my side. She stepped closer. "You people move in and think rules don't apply." The words hung there, heavier than the clipboard. I kept my voice steady. "What exactly do you mean by that?" She didn't answer directly. She didn't need to. 3 weeks later, my house burned. I didn't know then that she had already set something in motion. We didn't buy the biggest house on the block. We bought the one we could afford without losing sleep. 15 years of careful decisions went into that down payment. Extra shifts, delayed vacations, driving the same truck long after it stopped impressing anyone. Stability was the goal, not status. My wife wanted a neighborhood where the kids could ride bikes without us watching from the curb. I wanted a place where the numbers made sense. Fixed rate, manageable taxes, predictable dues, order, structure. Systems that worked because people respected them. I've practiced law most of my adult life. Civil litigation mostly. Contracts. Property disputes. The kind of cases that don't make headlines but shape how people live. I've always believed in process. Rules matters when they're applied evenly. Institutions matter when they're accountable. The garage still had pencil lines marking our daughter's height from the first year we moved in. Dates written in my wife's handwriting. Each line a quiet record of time doing what it's supposed to do, moving forward. We weren't trying to change the neighborhood. We wanted quiet, predictable, fair. She wanted control. The first violation notice arrived 2 days after she stepped off my lawn. The envelope was thin. Official logo stamped in blue across the corner. Notice of non-compliance. Mailbox color, non-approved beige. 10-day cure period. $50 fine. I checked the architectural guidelines that night. The color listed was sandstone. I held the printed page next to the mailbox the next morning. If there was a difference, required imagination. Another notice followed. Hairline cracks in the driveway. Then one for holiday lights. Left up 48 hours past the approved removal window. The letters were clinical, polite, relentless. Each one added a fee. Each fee accrued interest if unpaid. I paid nothing. Not out of defiance, out of procedure. I responded to every notice with certified mail, requested photographic evidence, requested inspection dates, requested the board vote minutes authorizing enforcement. She didn't answer directly. Instead, neighbors began asking if everything was okay at my place. Someone mentioned hearing I was in legal trouble. I recognized the tactic. Pressure without fingerprints. Under state statute, homeowners are entitled to review financial records. I submitted a formal request. Weeks passed. Partial documents arrived, heavily summarized. I read every line. That's when I saw it. A budget category labeled Emergency Remediation Reserve. It had doubled in the last year. No explanation in the meeting notes. No vote recorded. I asked for clarification. Silence. I kept sending letters. She kept talking in driveways. Then the anonymous complaints began. The sidewalks felt wider after that. Conversations stopped a few steps sooner. One neighbor who used to wave from his garage suddenly found tools to organize whenever I walked past. Another mentioned, carefully, that she'd heard I was gearing up to sue the community. I hadn't threatened anyone. I'd asked for records. At the next HOA meeting, my address was listed under new business. That was new. She stood at the front of the clubhouse with a printed packet and a tone of regret she didn't feel. We've received multiple concerns regarding ongoing non-compliance at Lot 47, she said. Property values are a shared responsibility. Lot 47. my home. A motion was introduced for a comprehensive property compliance audit, only my property. The vote passed quickly. When she opened the floor, I stood. I kept my voice level. Under state disclosure law, homeowners are entitled to complete financial records and minutes. I'm formally renewing that request. Her smile thinned. We'll review what's appropriate. I'm not asking what's appropriate, I said. I'm asking what's required. A few heads turned, not toward her. The next morning, I filed a statutory records demand through certified mail, citing specific code sections. That's when the tone shifted from petty to dangerous. The smoke alarm didn't scream at first. It clicked, sharp, irregular, like it was thinking about it. I woke to the smell before the sound fully caught up. Not the faint scent of something left on a burner. This was heavier, electrical. Bitter. I moved fast but not loud. Woke my wife, got the kids into the hallway. Smoke was already pooling near the ceiling, drifting down the staircase like fog that knew where it was going. I felt the heat before I saw the glow. Outside, the air was cold against my lungs. I counted heads twice. My son held onto my sleeve and watched the roofline flicker orange. The flames moved with confidence. Crawling through beams, we'd painted ourselves. The fire department contained it before it jumped to the neighbor's fence. The marshal walked through the charred remains the next morning. Preliminary red looks electrical, he said. Possibly accidental. I nodded. I'd had the wiring inspected 8 months earlier during a minor renovation. Clean report. Up to code. While we stood in the driveway wrapped in borrowed blankets, my son looked up at me and asked, "Did we do something wrong?" "No," I told him. And I meant it. A week before the fire, the HOA had quietly voted to increase the community hazard insurance rider. I didn't mention what I found in the debris. 2 weeks later, I received a copy of the HOA's insurance correspondence, by mistake. The envelope came from the HOA's management company. Inside was a copied email chain clearly not meant for me. The subject line referenced Lot 47, Risk Exposure. My address, the first message was from her, date stamped 9 days before the fire. She described ongoing compliance irregularities and expressed concern about potentially unsafe property conditions that may elevate hazard classification. She asked whether the association's policy would respond if known violations contributed to loss. The insurer replied cautiously, outlining reporting obligations and reminding the board that material representations affect coverage. There was no mention of flames, no prediction, just groundwork. I read the chain 3 times. Then I called a colleague who handles municipal liability. I didn't speculate. I forwarded the email and asked what it suggested. Delective risk reporting, he said carefully. Maybe positioning, maybe worse. But it establishes knowledge before loss. Knowledge before loss. I didn't confront her. I didn't forward the email back with questions. I expanded my records request. Sought board communications, insurance disclosures, audit trails. Paper leaves impressions when you press hard enough. During that same stretch of weeks, something else finalized. My appointment to the county civil bench cleared its last review. The governor's office issued the notice quietly. Swearing in scheduled. I told my wife. I told my parents. I did not tell the HOA. She had no idea the next time we'd meet, I wouldn't be sitting in the audience. The oath wasn't dramatic. No applause. Just a raised hand, a steady voice, and the weight of language that outlives the person speaking it. I'd spent my career inside courtrooms, but the bench changes your posture. You don't argue from there. You listen. You measure. I filed formal disclosures regarding my former residence and the fire. Any matter directly touching my property was reassigned without hesitation. That wasn't sacrifice. It was obligation. Months passed. The rebuild moved forward. Life narrowed to work and family. Then a new civil filing crossed my docket. Multiple homeowners versus the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. Allegations of selective enforcement, fiduciary breach, improper reserve allocations. Assignment is random in our county. This one landed in my courtroom. At the initial scheduling conference, I disclosed on the record that I had previously resided in the subdivision and experienced property loss. I invited motions for reassignment. None were filed. On the first full hearing date, she walked in and froze. She took the stand with the same posture she used on my lawn. Shoulders back, chin slightly raised, confidence practiced. The oath seemed to irritate her more than steady her. Plaintiff's counsel began simply. Questions about enforcement policies, fine schedules, reserve accounts. She described a system built on uniform application and community protection. Her tone was controlled, but there was an edge underneath it. Then the exhibits appeared on the screen. Get-a-mom chains, budget summaries, enforcement logs sorted by address. Patterns became visible when arranged chronologically. Certain properties cited repeatedly. Others, rarely at all. When asked about pre-loss communications with the insurer, she shifted in her seat. "We routinely assess risk," she said. "It's responsible governance." I leaned forward slightly. "For clarity," I asked, "were any other properties reported to the insurer for hazard review during that period?" A pause. "Not to my recollection." "What documentation supports that?" Her counsel requested a moment. What she didn't know was that every statement was now part of public record, indexed, time-stamped, retrievable. Her confidence narrowed into defensiveness. Answers shortened. Shoulders tightened. Then the forensic accountant took the stand. The accountant spoke without inflection. "Numbers don't need drama." He walked the court through reserve transfers first, line-by-line relocations, from general maintenance into the emergency remediation reserve. In the quarter preceding my fire, the increase had been justified internally as risk mitigation. No corresponding vote in the minutes. No homeowner notice. Next came enforcement data. Citations plotted against addresses over a 2-year span. A visible cluster formed around a handful of properties, mine included. Comparable violations elsewhere produced warnings, not fines. Patterns are difficult to argue with when they're color-coded. Finally, he addressed insurance correspondence. While not alleging causation, he testified that pre-loss communications characterized certain properties as elevated hazards without documented inspection reports to support the designation. Board members seated behind defense counsel shifted in their chairs. One requested to confer with his attorney. Another submitted an affidavit clarifying he had relied entirely on the president's representations. She maintained it was all misunderstanding, administrative discretion, good faith. No one accused her of lighting a match. They didn't have to. The reversal wasn't explosive. It was procedural, documented. The ruling wouldn't be emotional. I read, from the written order, findings of fact first. The association had engaged in selective enforcement inconsistent with its governing documents. Financial relocations into the emergency remediation reserve occurred without proper notice or recorded vote. Pre-loss insurance communications reflected material representations unsupported by documented inspection procedures. Then, conclusions of law. The board, acting through its president, breached its fiduciary duty to apply covenants uniformly and to manage association funds transparently. The court ordered independent financial oversight for a period of 3 years, mandatory policy revisions, full member access to enforcement logs. The question of individual officer liability was referred for separate review under applicable statutes. No raised voice. No commentary beyond the record. When I finished, I looked up briefly. She was staring at the tabletop, hands folded too tightly. For the first time since I'd known her, she had nothing to say. Court adjourned in the usual way. Chairs shifted. Papers gathered. Consequences would unfold in audits, reports, and meetings she no longer controlled. Justice isn't loud. It's documented. The house stands again. Not identical. New beams. Reinforced wiring. A different shade of trim. Approved, documented, signed off twice. The garage wall holds fresh pencil marks where my daughter insisted we restart the height chart. We copied the old measurements from photographs before the drywall came down. Continuity matters. The association looks different now, too. Independent audits posted online. Open meetings that actually follow an agenda. A new board president who begins sessions by reminding everyone that authority is borrowed, not owned. I never proved she lit the match. There was no criminal charge, no dramatic confession. What the court addressed was governance, duty, transparency, fairness. The rest belongs to speculation, and speculation doesn't belong in orders. Sometimes people ask if it felt like revenge. It didn't. Revenge is loud and brief. This was slower, deliberate, built on records requests, certified mail, disclosures, restraint. I didn't win because I was angry. I won because I stayed inside the process when it would have been easier to step outside it. My son doesn't ask if we did something wrong anymore. He rides his bike on the same sidewalk. We didn't force our way into that neighborhood. We bought a home. We followed the rules. We insisted they be followed back. We belonged there, and now it's written into the record.